Everyone out there, Coach Blue,
And
part of
Marissa.
Addict to Athlete, and Athletic Director Marissa.
Marissa.
There you go. You
I never
excited
know when to
today?
jump in. Sorry.
No, you're fine. You're just eager to get moving. I hear you. It's good stuff. Hey, welcome to Overtime. This is our Addict to Athlete podcast sister show. This is a time for you guys to submit questions you might have about addiction recovery, mental health, relationships, all that, and then some, and a little bit in the middle. So yeah, it's good to have you here. If for some reason you can't listen to this right now via our Facebook, Instagram, where else? YouTube, all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
This will be rebroadcast as a podcast later this week. So stay tuned. That way, if the boss walks in and he sees you listening to us, just tell him to jump on to addictathlete.org to find more. Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And again, we couldn't do this without our faithful Patreon subscribers. Our Patreon subscribers are what make this podcast possible. If you have an inkling, a desire, maybe even a want or a need for any bonus content, because there's a lot going up there right now, jump on patreon.com/addictoathlete. Pick a tier that works for you. Each tier comes with its own special perks and features. And, some new shirts going to be coming out here soon. But athletes, I really do appreciate everything you guys are doing. $2 a month can get you all of our backlog podcasts, everything that's in there right now.
Yeah.
Who are they who are making this possible, Marissa?
So we want to thank our super fans, Karen Hardy, Steve Riggs, Jerem Thurston, Tara Butson, Holly Davies, Scott Foster, Chris Williams, Sensei KP Brown, Patrick Forsyth, Brock Ellerman, Christy Case, Kel Lim, and we have a new super fan, Faith Davis.
Welcome to the Patreon family, Faith.
Yes.
Appreciate that.
Then we want to thank our rookies, Earl Dyer, Wendell Wood, Brad Waldron, Ron and D. Loesch, Sione and Mary Anouk. And our pro level, Justin Robbins, and our champion level, Shad and Freya Robinson, and Andrew Baird.
Man, I love all those folks. You guys, thank you so much. Efforts that help us get this thing out there to the ears and the hearts that need it. So thank you all so much. Again, patreon.com/addictoathlete. Check it out.
Yep. We've had 2 episodes up this week or the last week and a half. So you'll want to get on and get that.
And one of them is a speaking engagement that I did up at the what was that? The
Utah Foster Care.
The Utah Foster. What was the name of that?
Zermatt, Midway, Utah.
My gosh, man.
It's pretty up there.
We stayed up there and right as the leaves were changing, it was gorgeous. So yeah, check that out. We got that up for you. There's more stuff coming. So thank you all so much. We got Project ELF now on the horizon. Yes. Recovery month is over. Sober October is here. I hope that everyone who's made goals have kept them. And we're gearing up towards the pinnacle of the year, which is Project ELF.
Project ELF, Christmas is right around the corner.
Keep an eye on all of our social media. If you are able to donate, if you are in need, reach out. We're going to be doing some stuff this year that will benefit lots of families. And this is kind of it's a tradition that I really look forward to.
Yeah,
it is hard. It is challenging, but it is absolutely worth the investment. So
yeah, if you're interested in donating, we welcome any new unwrapped gifts, or if you want to sponsor a family when we start getting our applications in, you're interested in helping doing that. We've had some people come and contact us and they get their siblings together and a whole family, that's kind of their Christmas charity. And then they sponsor one of our families in need. And we couldn't do what we do without you guys. If you're interested, please email me, Marissa at addictoathlete.org.
Yeah, absolutely. So more of that to come. But listeners, hey, I'm so thankful that you're all here. We're grateful for everything that you're doing. Love hearing and reading your questions that you submit. And more importantly, like being part of this team. Like we are training several coaches right now to be opening up chapters of Addict to Athlete all over the place. Our newest chapter will be in Southern Arizona. We're excited to have them on board. And yeah, we got some neat things in the hopper. So it's about the grassroots level of approach to recovery. We're not going to be able to do this alone. We need your help. The troops aren't coming.
Yep.
You're the troops, right?
And every community needs it. So
yeah. So to dive into this, because we don't have as much time as we would like, I wanted to talk a little bit about maybe some continuation on what we discussed last week on Overtime. We talked a lot about relationships, and we did get some feedback about like what happens when my spouse or my partner, we start kind of having these head-on collisions with attitudes and behaviors. And a lot of this will happen, through addiction. It could happen through mental health, through trauma and tragedy. And we may not realize that some of this stuff bubbles up.
And just regular relationships. It doesn't need to be, romantic relationships. Everyone has these issues that we're going to discuss today, and it can come up in the healthiest of families and situations. So.
Absolutely. I mean, we were first introduced to this this book / this individual way back in the year of our Lord 1999.
Oh,
yeah, remember that? It was a while ago.
Before Y2K?
Before Y2K, absolutely. And the premise was, as I was going into therapy and counseling to deal with some of the stuff as Marissa and I were preparing for marriage, our therapist gave me this book, gave us this title of this book. Mm-hmm. And when we grabbed it, we were kind of blown away by it. And again, this has now been, 24 years later. Yep. It still holds so much value. This is John Gottman.
Yes.
And John Gottman, the book specifically, if you're going through any kind of marital struggles, it's 7 principles to a what is it? To a functional marriage?
To making a marriage work.
To making a marriage work.
Like that.
That's what it is. We love it so much we don't even know the name of it.
The Gottman Institute.
The Gottman Institute. Yeah. And the coolest thing about this is he studied how marriages survive and how they thrive, not what makes them divorce. It's easy to point out the flaws in this kind of mindset. It's a little harder to find out what are the connectors that make these marriages thrive.
Yeah, all of his research was on, people who'd been married like 30 years plus, and why is it they're working?
And it was cool because he brought up a lot of like simplistic principles that if you weren't aware, you'd probably gloss right on by. And last week when we were talking about, making sure that you're on the same page with communication and all these other things, the one thing we left out was, how do you identify when something's wrong? John Gottman goes through these things called the 4 horsemen, right? Mm-hmm. And he says, if one of these 4 horsemen are present in any relationship, the chances of them surviving without intervention are very slim. And I think that it's divine to me. I mean, the content that he's got here. Now, what does this look like? It's after a while, masks come off. We talk about this in the second stage of love, falling out of love. We all fall in love. That's great. It's temporary. We fall out of love for a time period, and we learn to love and be loved in that third stage. Usually, one of the 4 horsemen show up in that middle stage, right? It's that falling out of love, and they are pretty profound, right? So the first one that he identifies, they label as criticism, right? So think about this, one of the 4 horsemen labeled criticism. This is verbally attacking or a person, your loved one, your spouse, their character. So it's kind of like you're pointing out flaws, you're criticizing them for behaviors, things, and it's kind of right to the core.
And it's different than like offering voicing your complaint or something like that. It's a little bit deeper than that.
Give us an example, because you and I have seen this. I remember we were at at church once, and we leaned over like, can you see how she's talking about her husband when he's not around? It was kind of one of those things where it's like, if she's comfortable sharing those critiques in a negative manner in public like this, I can't imagine what's going on at home.
Yeah, it's just more of like attacking somebody's character.
Mm-hmm.
An example would be
don't ask my husband to do anything. That guy's the laziest git around. He doesn't do anything around the house. In fact, I had him trying to do
and I was scared when you were running late. You didn't call me. I thought we agreed that you'd do that, and we do that for each other, and then the return is you never think about how your behavior is affecting other people. I don't believe you're forgetful. You're just selfish. Yeah. You never think of others, and you never think of me.
There you go. Yep. See, so it's like criticizing them for who they are,
It's more deep on their
Absolutely. It's a little bit more like razor's edge, right?
Yeah.
So if there's a criticism type mindset, we'll give you the antidotes to those. But the next horseman is called the horseman of contempt. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of attaching a sense of self-worth with the intent of insult or abuse, right? How would you best describe a contemptuous like horseman? What would that look like?
I think it goes even further than criticism, and it's like
this is like disdain. This is
it attacks their character, but then it also puts you as like this morally superior.
Mm-hmm.
You're so much better, and you're just looking down on the other person.
Yeah.
Yeah, with disgust.
If you have contempt for someone, that means that not only do you dislike that person, you disdain them, but it's like you actively look for ways to continue to insult or abuse. Like you look for that kind of stuff. Like, why do you even care? You wouldn't understand. Your pay grade isn't up to my level, sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
This happens in relationships where there's a very strange power dynamic shift where there's this histrionic kind of like, well, not histrionic, this history of like, we'll say that patriarch of the family. I'm the man, so I rule the roost. And if the spouse doesn't agree to that, then there's disdain and contempt for a pushback. And that can turn into some real intense emotional abuse, even into some physical abuse.
Yeah.
But contempt means that there's just anger and frustration and you think of that word, you can just think of like the illest will towards that person.
Yeah. And the Gottman Institute, they say that contempt is the single greatest predictor of divorce. So out of all this that we're going to talk about today, like that's the one where it's just really, really deep in attacking the person, but not only attacking them, but making yourself feel superior, but also the feelings and emotions behind contempt are pretty strong.
I've seen contempt kind of fall into relationships where there's been a huge uprooting and change. Like maybe your spouse gets a job somewhere and they have to move the family to fill that void, right? And so the partner could be full of contempt because now they have to start over. They're in a foreign place. They don't know anyone. It's great for you because you go to work and you get to know these people, but I am unfamiliar. Or maybe finances, like you know what, I had no idea that when I married you, you had all these fines and legal issues and the DUIs and all this stuff, and it's your fault that we are in this hole.
Well, and it gets even deeper of like, you're such an idiot, you're so dumb, you're pathetic, and so it's not only like the behavior, but really attacking their character and just the deepness of the anger.
You can kind of tell why Gottman would label contempt as probably the most the strongest self-identifier of a broken relationship.
Yeah, I mean, how do you have respect or have an equal ground in a relationship to feel like partners when somebody's attacking like that?
Yeah, I don't think you can. The third horseman, defensiveness, right? This is where you're victimizing yourself toward any perceived attack or maybe some reverse blame shifting. And defensiveness happens a lot too, where we feel as though we need an explanation for behaviors or whatnot. And it's like when someone points out something that's maybe rough in the relationship, it's completely thrown back at them. Oh yeah, well, what about you when you do this? Or what about that when that happens? And so defensiveness is kind of a self-preservation like response.
And I think it comes often from criticism, that first one.
Yeah.
When you're being criticized, and you feel that that's not fair or unjust, you start digging for excuses and playing the victim, just trying to get the other person to back off and attack in a different way. And it's just a different way of like trying to fight.
Absolutely.
Yourself.
Defensiveness was it's one that I see quite a bit in relationships that I counsel. And a lot of time it's because the person doesn't feel as though they're heard, like you're not listening. And so there's that self-preservation mindset of like, if I don't get this back out, like he's going to gloss right over it. But it's also what we talk about in core communication. It's controlled talk with reactive listening.
Yeah, some blaming and back and forth.
Absolutely. And one of the things that sucks too in relationships that get into these horsemen is that when it's all said and done and when things are forgiven, do you put them in a container on the shelf in a break in case of emergency situation where you need some arsenal and you need some ammo for whatever it's going to come up? Once these things are complete, you have to let that stuff go.
Yeah.
And it's not fair to hang on to it. And defensiveness really kind of like, you kind of like hang on to that ammo just in case moment.
Just have it in your in the back.
The last of the four horsemen is one of my favorites, one that I did quite a bit. This was my favorite horse to ride. Stonewalling. And this is where withdrawing to avoid the conflict or to convey disapproval and like having some distance or the silent treatment or like some separation. Stonewalling sucks because, and I think this is a lot of people's favorites because they just get quiet.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, and it's, I guess, maybe the least offensive of the others.
Well,
Because
that's
those
nice.
are
If that was my favorite one with you, I'm glad that
attacking.
you said that was the least effect.
I mean, at least stonewalling isn't like attacking the person's character.
It's
It's
true.
just trying to, they just shut down. And I think oftentimes stonewalling comes from a place of maybe trauma or,
Oh, for
all
sure.
of these come from usually a history, depending on how your parents maybe interacted or how you grew up and you saw people work through conflict and work through, opposition here. But yeah, if you're always the one that's losing out, you just learn to just be quiet.
Yeah.
Just ignore it and just don't worry about it. It's over. But that's hard too, because if you just stonewall all the time, then usually that resentment builds up in the
Oh, for
background.
sure. One of the other horsemen will come forward.
Mhm.
And that's true. Like most people want to avoid conflict at all costs. And so stonewalling is the simplest and, like you said, least evasive one
Yeah.
to kind of use and to pull that card.
Not wanting to like cause any waves or
Mhm. But it doesn't create a healthy relationship
No.
because it breaks conversation. Because there's been times, I even remember when I would stonewall against something that Marissa was doing or saying, that I might have had some good content to fill that void with that I thought, well, it's not worth it.
Mhm.
And Marissa's not the kind of person to be like, it's my way or the highway. Like she listens. And so once the waters were tested and once we started applying some of the antidotes to the horsemen to kind of cancel them out,
Yeah.
I think that's where that was released for me. I'm like, wait a minute. And we should start here with the antidote. So if you're in a stonewalling mindset, you have to use the antidote of self-soothing. Take a break, spend some time doing something else.
Mhm.
Go for a run, take a break. And that's what Marissa and I did. A lot of times, like we would separate to our
Wow.
corners.
Yeah. And usually it comes from feeling like psychologically flooded. So yes, do you need a break often and you need to calm down or maybe regroup? Absolutely.
So
But
then
you
with
have
that,
to be able to communicate that, right?
yeah, with that
Like,
mindset though, what
yeah.
about that old advice? Never go to bed angry.
Yes.
What do you think of that?
I have never liked that one because I often need that time to go to bed, sleep it off, calm down, and then all of a sudden I have a whole different perspective in the morning and I can see everything different. And, so it's not a bad thing to just take a break, but you have to be able to communicate that like,
Mhm.
hey, I'm really upset right now. I'm too angry to think clearly even. I need a break. And then after I've calmed down, I'm absolutely want to still talk about this rather
Yeah.
than just not talking, not addressing it and trying to pretend it didn't happen. And then just if you ignore it, it'll go away, right?
For
No,
sure.
Not usually.
You and I have done things like this, which is kind of funny. Like when we've had some of our humdinger disagreements and we like storm off and, slam a door. I don't know if we do that, but like, go to our corners. It's funny because as angry and as frustrated and as right as I know I am, it's funny when you sit there for a minute and you're like, oh, I can kind of see maybe how that came out that way.
Yeah.
And it's funny. Before cell phones, it was always one of us kind of like, hey, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Now for some reason it's a text. Hey, sorry about that, which is so funny.
Yeah.
They both work.
It still works.
They both work. And we haven't had one of these in a long time. Maybe we should
No.
drum something up.
Sure.
Yeah.
But again, like if you're talking about the anger stuff, no matter any of these, and you're getting so upset, anger usually brings about the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response, right? And so what it does is it usually sends all of your blood, all of your energy to your limbs so that you can do something
with
it. So what does it do? It's going to take the blood away from your brain, meaning you will not be able to think clearly. So if things are that intense, you do need to take a break, or you oftentimes will say or do something that you'll regret. So it's important to recognize that, yeah, I'm too upset to think clearly about this, but I understand it's important and we need to discuss it, but let's give it some time so we can talk about it.
Which is wild. Which is absolutely wild. And I think stonewalling and self-soothing are probably, like you said, the least impactful, but the easiest to kind of redeem. But defensiveness, if we get back moving upwards, right? this is a hard one because this requires you taking responsibility for yourself. And there's been times when I've had to do that with you. You've done that with me. It's about accepting your partner's perspective and offering an apology for any wrongdoing. As Father is my witness, you know when you've screwed up. You know when you've done something too far. You know when you've pushed that line and that limit. And by you not taking responsibility for your actions in that, you're letting pride get in the way, and you will not be able to correct the ship.
Mm-hmm.
You will hit the rocks, right?
Yeah.
Why do you think taking responsibility is so hard for most people?
Well, it's a pride thing for sure. It's an ego thing, and you want to be right. Most people do. And it's understandable to defend yourself, and you don't just let somebody like run over you, but it's also important to take responsibility for your portion.
Yeah.
Again, if there's a conflict, if there's contention anywhere with two people, it's because there's more than one person. You can't really have conflict with yourself very well. I mean, I guess a little bit, but like, you know what I mean? There has to be two people. And so you can't say that all the responsibility is on your partner, that they're the one 100% in the wrong. You did nothing wrong. You have to, it takes two to tango. There's a portion there somewhere.
If you do that, if you're the kind of person that when someone else starts taking responsibility that you just add on to it, how dare you?
Yeah.
One of the coolest things I think in maturing into an adult is the ability to even do this.
Yeah.
I remember we've talked about this on the podcast before when Boston, our oldest boy, when he was a little guy, and I would tease him about commercials that came on for girls' toys and stuff. And he had a little conversation with me about how much he didn't like that. My instinct was to be defensive. It was to be like, dude, you are like 4 years old.
Knock it off.
Knock it off. I'm just teasing you. Grow up.
Yeah.
Right, 4 years old. And I had to like pause for a second. And then I didn't say any of that, but I thought, this is kind of crazy. Like, he's asking me to take responsibility.
Yeah. And
to do that and to be like, man, I'm sorry about that. You're right. I won't do that again.
Well, and often when you're in a situation like that, you feel bad for maybe something that you did or said. So it's easy to go, oh, you're just blowing it out of proportion. I was just kidding. Just let it roll off your back. But accept whatever they're saying as truth, that maybe it really did hurt, or maybe it did, and apologize for that, you know, that you said something that hurt them. You didn't mean to hurt their feelings.
I think taking responsibility is the most emotionally mature thing you can do. Like, it shows how much emotional intelligence you have, because you all know when you've pushed things way too far. You know this, right? And by doing that, it's not about surrendering power, control, or whatever. It's about you being able to gain that footing and reestablish the what is in the relationship.
Yeah.
So it's a big one. The contempt is even more difficult. And this is where I kind of like maybe jump ship a little bit, because thank heavens I've never had these feelings, you or anything else.
Yeah.
But it is interesting. Remember, contempt is that sense, attaching that sense of self with the intent to insult or abuse. And the antidote to that is to show appreciation, building a culture of appreciation, reminding yourself of your partner's qualities, and to find gratitude for the positive things that you have been through and done.
Yeah.
It is challenging someone that has such deep contempt to find appreciation. I think that's like moving a mountain, but that is the antidote.
It makes perfect sense. It's the exact opposite of that contempt and looking down, is to be able to go, I appreciate this, and looking at all of the positive things, and what are you grateful for with this person, and, looking at, the higher parts of the relationship.
I'm going to peel a scab off on this one, and this has been so long. But I remember when I was doing, I think it was when we were in school, I was in class, and we were having groups and stuff. With all the students, we were just, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, not even licensed yet. And we were in group therapy class. And the conversation came up that there was contempt in the relationship. Obviously, they didn't identify that. But the situation was that the woman's husband, and she was the one in the class, and she was explaining this, the woman's husband had detached from her because he no longer was physically attracted to her due to weight gain after children, and there was no intimacy. There was a lot of like contempt that you let yourself go, and it's like, how dumb are you, sir? Right? Like, how dumb are you for
like
not noticing what the crap's going on, right? But that was exactly kind of what the instructor taught. He's like, well, how would you like to be appreciated? Like, what would you like? He's like, that I've born his children, that, that the stretch marks are battle scars. And, and it kind of hit me because I'm like, that is a messed up mindset. But then I got thinking, but it happens probably a lot.
Yeah.
So that contempt that someone might have for someone because their physical appearance have changed, it's not up to par for what they want. And, whether it's you need to go get liposuction and a boob job or else, that to me that's some heinous mindset.
Well, again, it's that superiority thing.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so much better. I look great. I look fabulous, or I'm never going to age, or, really just give it some time.
Yeah. Criticizing what your spouse is eating or something, the appreciation factors, that's with the person that's dealing out the contempt. That's not the person receiving it. That's the person that needs to change their ways. Yeah. I think that would be incredibly challenging.
You're going to have a long,
lonely life. Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, criticism, right? The antidote for that is a gentle startup. I mean, if you're verbally attacking a person's character, you need to reframe that to become what's called the gentle startup, talking about, like feelings, using the I am statements. It's those kind of things that kind of expresses like a positive need. And this is kind of a crazy criticism. It's like, look in the mirror, you doofus. Like, like that's a hard one, I think sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we don't realize that, but a gentle startup should be how every conversation starts, especially if it's one that you might feel as though you don't want to take. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't really want to have this conversation. So instead of saying wrecking ball,
emotional and difficult,
Absolutely. And so a gentle startup is going to allow you guys to kind of get into the groove of things. It's going to start with maybe some small talk. It's going to get into some search talk. It's going to avoid with all ability any kind of control talk. And it may require a straight talk like finalization, right?
Yeah. But you're going to start maybe with like, thank you for being willing to talk. And I need your help knowing how to feel about this situation. And, can you share, your perspective in the situation that recently happened, and being open to listening to them rather than trying to quickly talk over them as they give their response, even if it's something that you don't agree with or don't believe in, just listen. Don't be listening ready to try to attack.
Which is funny because as I think about this, there was a time in our lives where you needed to make a very gentle startup. And I always talk about this with people that are in counseling with me about, how can I talk to my spouse? And, I felt at a time that you were being very criticizing of my calling I had in the church. Where you were seeing the candle being burnt on both ends. I was like, it's my responsibility, duty, whatever,
to do it all.
And every time you would try to create a gentle startup, I would stonewall you, And Marissa did something.
Well, because often you took it as
I took it as criticism.
I was criticizing, and you became defensive, and then.
But you weren't really criticizing. I took it as that, so I was more on the defensive side then, right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So if I was defensive because I thought you were criticizing, and so and there were times when I remember you trying to really make these gentle startups, but I'd be like, "Aha, I know what you're doing," right?
Yeah.
And so
and you continue to make your excuses and reasons as to why to.
And they were really good,
yourself.
weren't they? They were really good excuses, but they were still just a story
for your experience and perspective.
Yeah. And so, there's the being part of a church that we belong to here. We have these very sacred temples we belong to, and Marissa took me to a very special place in that room, and a room in that temple, where you can't really run away, and you can't get mad and angry. You just got to just listen. And she made the most gentle startup conversation where I actually felt where she was coming from, and it was out of a place of sincerity, and like. I was like, I can't believe it took you to bring me here where I couldn't like stonewall. I had to just sit and listen because you don't want to make a scene in there.
Yeah.
And it was why didn't I hear that outside? Why did it
Yeah.
need to be there? Does that make sense? And I've thought about that a lot, about your willingness to not drop it because you knew at the end it was for my gain and for my benefit,
Yeah.
but I needed to just listen.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do that in a place that had a lot of distractions or,
Well, in places that you could, yell and fight your place back,
that was
I
really smart of
put you in an
them.
environment where it was peaceful and nice, and you
And it
were
helped me
just,
immensely.
yeah,
It helped me immensely. And I'll always remember that because, again, I don't think I really would have given the time that it needed to be worked out because I wasn't hearing your side of it. I was already making my assumptions.
and I think we've both done that at different times.
Oh, yeah.
Where
Mhm.
it's like you just see your part and where, your perspective, and you assume that that's all there is because that's all you see.
That's all you
And
see.
it's hard sometimes to shift and go, okay, maybe that's not the whole picture, and maybe I'm too close to the subject and the situation to see it clearly.
Yeah. It's a cool thing. What it does ultimately, listeners, is bring you to a heightened awareness about being able to really strengthen the union between you and your spouse, your partner. It's one of the neatest things that can happen when we realize that none of us are perfect. We've all got problems, but if you can hang in there a little while, some cool stuff can happen, right?
Eliminating some of the negative and moving forward in like productive communication patterns, and trying, because this isn't something that just happens overnight. It's not really quick and easy. It takes time.
Yeah.
It takes practice. We've not managed it to master it all the time either, and
Exactly.
we're 24 years in, and so it takes practice. Everybody has things that just come up, and so it's just trying to pay attention to those, the other side of that chart, the
Mhm.
gentle, what were they for? What were the four? Gentle
The gentle startup.
startup. It's showing appreciation, taking responsibility, and doing what you need to self-soothe.
So imagine in your relationship if you utilize the antidotes instead of the horsemen,
Mhm.
right? In any conversation, starting up slow, being able to appreciate that person for who they are and what they are,
Yeah.
taking responsibility, and then being able to self-soothe because and you can do that together. That's what's cool about all this
Mhm.
stuff. That's why I love John Gottman. I would definitely check out that book if any of you are struggling with that. They have it on audiobook and on paperback. We still have it. I assign it to pretty much everyone that comes into family counseling. And it goes into deeper things like love mapping, which means kind of like how well do you authentically know your spouse?
Yeah. Gives you
It gives you
homework and
assignments and games almost. There's a big long list in there about things that you may not know about your spouse. Like for instance, what is your spouse's greatest fear? What relative are they closest to? Like these are things that you should know
but
that I'll
maybe you
bank
never
on.
brought up.
You probably don't.
Who was the most influential person in your life as a child?
It's like the Newlywed Game, only like a little bit deeper with
deeper.
higher stakes, right?
Yeah.
So that being said, listeners, we wanted to jump on here and kind of give you a little bit more to the conversation we had last week. This is kind of what marriages ebb and flow within. And we'll leave some links to that book when the podcast comes out. But yeah, keep the conversations going. There's a lot of learning to do when you have a spouse that's been in addiction or mental health issues or tragedy or trauma. All you newlyweds out there, I highly recommend doing this before the problems start. That's what we did every time we would drive anywhere. Marissa would read the book as I was driving. We'd talk about it. And in fact, I hate to almost say this, but we got to a point where everything was going so well, we never really finished the last couple of chapters.
Well, because we also
read them, but,
started it before we got married, and some
Mhm.
of the chapters were more for people
Mhm.
who've been together years and years.
Yeah.
So it didn't apply at that time.
And since we've listened and completed it, but it was that good. And I really do think that my therapist Arlen, if I could ever find that guy,
You
was
guys,
inspired.
if anyone knows a man named Arlen who's a therapist, back in 1999.
1999, BYU.
Yeah, School of Social Work. I think
funny.
he was an intern at the
Yeah, he was an intern.
LDS Family Services.
Which is funny because when we said we were getting married, I told him, he's like, you better bring her in here. And I'm like, why? So funny. Oh, man, if we would have had vlogging back then, I could have made such great content. Holy cow. Nonetheless, guys and gals out there, thank you so much for all that you're doing. Jump on the website, addictoathlete.org. This podcast will be releasing later this week. And keep the questions and comments coming. Until next time, do your best to turn your mess